Welcome back to Cinelog, the series where I review every important or interesting film from history in chronological order. Today we cover 1951. Much like the year previous, the United States is embroiled in both the Red Scare and the Korean War, which politically split Hollywood right down the middle. More importantly, 1951 is a landmark year for a new kind of filmmaking: television. By 1951, nearly 12 million American homes had a TV set. With this development, many film studios strive to bring new, revolutionary techniques to large-screen cinema. However, television's popularity also saw the rise of daytime soap operas. This is a style that would soon bleed into movies, for better or worse. Take note of how many films going forward I refer to as soapy or cheap. Starting off the year, I watched Miracle in Milan, Vittorio De Sica's follow-up to his much-lauded neorealist masterpiece, Bicycle Thieves. Miracle is like a cherry blast smoothie to that film's black coffee, saccharine to the core, taking the most childlike elements of Chaplin and Capra and fitting them with a neorealist twist. The first half is absorbing, a delightfully comedic chronicle of the development of an impoverished Milanese slum community, spearheaded by the embodiment of altruism personified in our main character. When the titular miracle kicks in during the second half, the film does derail a bit into stakeless whimsy, though there's still enough good stuff here to keep it engaging. Really impressed by how much is conveyed exclusively through visuals as well. This would have fit right in with the class-conscious comedies of the late silent era, something I'm sure De Sica absolutely intended here. Then I watched the Browning version, an English classic about a strict schoolteacher whose life slowly unravels during his final term. I thought this was a beautiful character study of a principled man living in an unprincipled world. At first, the film challenges the audience to sympathize with Andrew despite his detestable characteristics, instead favoring the immediately likable Frank Hunter. When it turns the tables about halfway through and reveals that Andrew has good intentions, only life has poisoned them, it's monumentally effective. Every subsequent emotional blow is earned and paid off brilliantly from that point on. My only major critique is that Andrew's wife isn't given remotely the same level of empathy as him, so her actions aren't as justified and their conflict feels incredibly one-sided. Showing what made their relationship so miserable for her would have done wonders for that subplot. But doesn't detract that much. Frankenthaplow's acts of kindness make for some devastating scenes in the third act, and that final speech couldn't have been better written or performed. Looking for more of a genre film, I then watched The Thing from Another World, effectively a Howard Hawks movie. This is a staple of 50s science fiction. While it certainly doesn't hold a candle to John Carpenter's remake, I was surprised at how heady and conceptual this one was. Much more interested in exploring the science than the remake, which, if you find that stuff interesting, then maybe you should enjoy this. If not, I understand. I really love the way the script focuses on the implications of discovering intelligent alien life and how that would make the world so much larger. There's some kind of cosmic terror to that which the film happily exploits. As a horror movie, it's okay. The monster doesn't exactly hold up, and the horror scenes are way too campy to take seriously. The conflict between the scientists and the soldiers does a pretty good job depicting the danger of human curiosity, at least. Slap on a darker ending, and you basically have a pretty good feature-length episode of The Twilight Zone. After that, I watched Ace in the Hole. This one is about a big city journalist who exploits a tragedy in the Midwest in order to revitalize his dying career. Essentially, a biting critique of American society at the time that exposes how the American dream procures apathy in those who pursue it. From setting the tale in a conquered native city to the gross circus act that forms around this tragedy, everything plays into that theme. Ironically enough, it's our aspirational journalist who's the only one to show some sympathy in the end. While the femme fatale character is pretty weak, everything else about this works, and it makes for an essential self-critique of 1950s America. Next, I watched The Lavender Hill Mob. This is a very funny movie that I have literally nothing else to say about. Next. After that, I hit up the yearly Hitchcock with Strangers on a Train. This is Hitchcock in full blockbuster mode. He's pulling out set piece after set piece after set piece, and it is glorious to watch. While the daunting murder sequence is impressive in its own right, with such a perfect climactic shot and the out-of-control carousel and unforgettable finale, it's the mock strangulation scene that I find the most nerve-wracking. Hilarious, nail-biting, and just batshit insane, it is indicative of everything I love about this movie. Important thing to note is that the script was written by 3 women, and it definitely has a sort of feminine edge to it. A lot of leg crossing, a lot of flamboyant wardrobe choices, a lot of feminine main characters. There are some dumb aspects of the plot, but man, this is just such a fun watch. Then I watched Alice in Wonderland. I feel like I just fucking tripped acid. Holy shit. There is no plot. It's just a bunch of wacky shit, which I kind of love. It has an almost Lynchian quality of just being a never-ending nightmare. Highlights include the morbid Walrus and Carpenter story, the brain-hemorrhaging Tea Party sequence, and pretty much every second the Cheshire Cat is on screen. The big problem here, however, is that the surrealism is upset by near-lethal doses of whimsy that permeate every nook and cranny of this film's being. Certainly one of Disney's most audacious and memorable works, though a far cry from their most satisfying. Following that, I watched A Place in the Sun. Okay, we have our first soap opera, a rare film where the second act is actually the strongest, and it is actually a pretty strong second act. Watching the main character's two relationships tangle and tangle until he reaches this climactic final decision where he has to choose between them propels the core conflict. Unfortunately, said climactic decision is never reached. The third act derails into pulpy courtroom drama, and I'm just not there for it. Our lead is very shallow and not very empathetic. I'll give props to the performances and some of the editing choices, but yeah, boring. Then I watched The River by Jean Renoir, essentially a love letter to India and a celebration of life in general. The plot is very thin, following an English family living there and tracking their day-to-day lives. Much like A Day in the Country, this is pure impressionism in film form. If you're a fan of Terrence Malick, you should get a kick out of this too. Renoir's direction definitely conveys the simple pleasures of life and the nuances of Indian culture with so much vivid detail that you almost feel like you're there. While the drama's very light, and I'm not sold on all of the things that happen in the final stretch, Renoir never lets it get overwrought. It's a very easy film to get swept away by. After that, I checked out another 50s science fiction classic, Robert Wise's The Day the Earth Stood Still. Keanu Reeves is pretty awful in this, though it has some of the best production value of any film in the 50s, so massive props. Okay, after that I watched... Okay, alright. It's, I don't have much to say, really. It's a cute little family movie. I appreciate the message. The characters are way too stupid for me to take serious. A lot of the humor clashes with Wise's documentary-style direction, and I don't really buy this central romance. The effects are actually pretty sick for 1951, though. Alright, then I watched A Streetcar Named Desire. Look, stage plays are tricky things to adapt. A lot of things are explained through dialogue that you'd actually get to see in a movie. In theater, it's acceptable, bearing in mind the limitations of the stage. In film, drama should not be referred to in dialogue but expressed visually. Otherwise, we don't really have a connection to it. In film, it's character, it's flavor, it's detail. It isn't the actual substance of the movie. While watching, I wondered if I would enjoy this more if I had no idea what the actors were saying. A version in the style of a silent film with intertitles for only the most important information would honestly be far more engaging. So much of it is just nonsense. Exposition is frustratingly buried away in rambles on Napoleonic code and boring anecdotes. Not only that, but said exposition lacks the visual component necessary to make any of it compelling. The film contains roughly 3 scenes which do not take place in the Kowalski apartment. In order to fill in the gaps, the characters have to talk about what's going on. They have to explain scenes that we don't get to witness. It gets tedious real quick. Emotions are conveyed fine by the actors, but their words fail to have any kind of dramatic impact. It's also very hard to be invested when every single scene drags on for so long. I have no idea why you'd ever watch this over a live performance of the play, other than, convenience. Continuing my losing streak, I watched this year's Best Picture winner, An American in Paris. Thinly defined characters dick around an obvious Los Angeles set masquerading as a Parisian paradise. Musical interludes act as the film's only appeal, showcasing an admittedly impressive display of human form. Too bad director Vincente Minnelli is not up to task, directing most scenes with the energy and excitement of a bad sitcom. Only during the dance sequences does he seem even remotely interested in that pesky notion of cinema. The driving conflict, a generic love triangle with an unearned resolution. Inoffensive for sure, but Singing in the Rain this ain't. Next I watched Early Summer. This is an Ozu flick about, family drama and whatnot, Ozuisms. Love how this opens with the rolling waves of time that closed late spring. Kind of puts it into a different perspective, knowing that this is something of a thematic sequel. While this has all the hallmarks of Ozu's best work, including a heartbreaking conclusion, the sprawling, multi-character narrative never quite justifies its mass. Over 2 hours of humorous anti-drama that delivers its subtextual conflict through snail-paced scenes and thin plot progression. Lacks the focus of late spring, and its symbolism isn't nearly as profound. Still a solid piece in showing the gradual erosion of a family unit. It gets its point across with serious humbleness and tact. And rounding out the year, we have John Huston's The African Queen. This is a very enjoyable dumb adventure flick. Contrived, formulaic, and predictable for sure, but carried by enough passion and effort to keep it interesting. The daring, on-location cinematography certainly helps. There's a rich sense of adventure conjured up by the romance, set pieces, and technicolor that Huston happily capitalizes on. Far from his best work, but a charming romp nonetheless.
I have the best way and the best tools. Simple, silent, and quick. The silent part being the most important. Let me show you what I mean. You don't mind if I borrow your neck for a moment, do you?
Oh, if it's not for long.
Oh,